Berkeley psychologists have been doing experiments where they induce winners and losers in a game of Monopoly. When people are invited to play Monopoly, some of them are randomly given more money than other players at the beginning of the game. And then they're also given more turns on the board, and so that they're given many kinds of free passes to win the game of Monopoly. And when you interview the people afterwards, even though people were given a huge leg up at the beginning of the game, when you interview them afterwards, they often attribute their success to their skills and their ability to play the game more successfully. They apparently completely forget that they were given this huge leg up at the beginning of the game. It's a really fascinating experiment.
Income inequality in the city of Boston is getting worse.
Tonight, the president will say that economic fairness is, quote, the defining issue of our time.
How can it be, he wrote, that it's not a news item when an elderly homeless person dies of exposure, but it is news when the stock market loses 2 points?
Listen, on the issue of income inequality,
yes,
it's a good issue for the Democrats because there's no question that it exists.
Income inequality, in plain and simple terms, can be defined and summed up in one word. And that word is divided, hence the title.
Before making the movie, it was difficult to pinpoint what exactly the problem was and why it was such a big deal.
I work 7 days a week. The rent is expensive.
But after speaking to economists, experts, and politicians,
it's not a gap between the rich and the poor, it's a gap between the rich and everybody else.
And speaking to millionaires and people just getting by, you really start to see it.
It's rough. It's rough. Every day you got to struggle and fight just to survive out here.
You see income inequality in Boston. Take a look at the $1 million homes on Beacon Hill. Then you walk a bit and it's a different story. You see it on the train. You're riding with some people who can barely afford the fare. You get out and you see a Maserati parked on the street. In fact, in 2013, Boston was the third most financially divided big U.S. city, only behind Atlanta and San Francisco. Today, Americans have hit a boiling point. People say they have had enough, and they are taking action.
Out of working, sweating, and putting out sweat, blood, and tears in his job, and not receiving a fair wage.
But how do you fix income inequality?
The most civil and simple way to do that is through taxation. If you were to tax just 1% of that, so 1% of the 1%'s wealth, over 10 years you'd raise $2.5 trillion.
What's the other side to this?
You want to fix that problem? Cut the taxes in the United States.
Income inequality is an issue that isn't just in Boston or the cities. From coast to coast, it is a problem across this nation. The United States, a country once built on the American dream, is now divided. LaShonda lives in Canton, Massachusetts, a suburb of Boston. She is a single mom, putting in close to 60 hours a week. LaShonda has a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. She got both while working full-time.
There's always going to be reasons not to do something, and you really just have to focus on the reasons why you must.
This attitude would come to make all the difference.
And at that time it was, again, $10 an hour, 20 hours a week, and having that job is when, at that stage when my food stamps were cut.
It was 1996. She was a new mom making less than $200 a week, and the city said she was making too much money to continue on public assistance.
And, it was that crossroads there where I had to decide if I would quit my job so that I could afford to, live, take care of my daughter, or if I was going to continue to work.
And what did you decide to do?
I decided that I was going to work.
LaShonda would eventually leave that low-paying job. She now says she makes a sufficient income working as a business manager at a Boston-based hospital. But she still struggles to live out a classic bedrock American principle.
My American dream would be to own my own home, be able to pay the bills in comfort, to grocery shop in comfort, not worry about what the budget is for grocery shopping, and to not have to worry financially, I would say, to be able to obtain, education and knowledge for the things that I want, not necessarily, for the things that I need.
And this feeling of working hard and still falling behind is mirrored by millions of Americans across this country. A few years back, you may have started to hear about income inequality. People fed up with working hard and getting nowhere. They called it the Occupy movement. The 99% protesting the 1%, a small group of people making up the most wealth in the United States. But now it is much less than just 1%.
We used to talk about the 99 to 1. Now it's really the 0.1%, that tiny figure. It's 120,000 families with assets over $20 million. So there's a problem on the bottom, and it has a lot to do with the problem at the top.
We spoke to Josh Hoxie at the Institute for Policy Studies in Boston. He says the problem has everything to do with balance, or lack thereof.
When resources concentrate in so few hands, the people on the other end of the spectrum don't have the resources they need to get by.
Today in the U.S., the top 400 wealthiest individuals have more wealth than the bottom 150 million Americans. And it actually goes even further than this.
They now own $2.34 trillion. That's an enormous amount of money, and it's the highest concentration of wealth our country's ever seen.
Here's another look. Today, when you look at real median family income, you will notice that it's nearly $5,000 less a year than it was in 1999. When you look at the average male worker, after adjusting for inflation, he's making nearly $800 less a year than he was making in 1973. And it's even worse for a female worker. She is making almost $1,500 less a year than she did just 8 years ago. America's 20th wealthiest people now have more wealth than the bottom half of the American population combined. And the minimum wage, though a few real dollars higher now, is actually 23% less than its peak inflation-adjusted value than it was in 1968. This means the minimum wage is actually lower now than it was over 40 years ago. Inequality has reached a boiling point for workers across the nation.
One, we're tired of the same inequality that we're receiving. One, we're tired of working, sweating, and putting up sweat, blood, and tears in this job and not receiving a fair wage.
In Boston, fast food workers are protesting to push local leaders to address the earnings of low-wage employees.
I'm here because a living wage is not $9 an hour, it's not $10 an hour. What we make now is not enough to live off of, and it's important that we take care of our families and take care of ourselves as well.
Today we are seeing a divided city, in a split nation, stagnant wages for a majority of Americans. But how did it get so bad? Well, for that, we have to back up to the 1940s. The American soldier was coming home. World War II was over, and we won.
Peace. It's wonderful.
Things were good. The inequalities of the Gilded Age seemed like a distant memory. We started to see growth again, and the middle class was stronger. The U.S. was taxing people with high incomes and wealth to help balance the concentration of money. Income inequality was shrinking, and still, that highest 1% saw their incomes rise during this period, along with everybody else. We saw home ownership increase to 63%. Veterans got to go to school debt-free because of the GI Bill, and others too with Pell Grants and other educational opportunities. But even if you didn't go to college, you could still get a good manufacturing job and make an income that could support a family. Most everyone was doing well. But then, around the 1980s, something started to change. President Ronald Reagan was facing a huge deficit.
I regret to say that we're in the worst economic mess since the Great Depression.
He was forced to make some changes, and while we still saw growth, the bottom 20% of workers started to see their wages decline. Things were pulling apart. Technology started to change the landscape of the job market. The decline of labor unions and globalization was also playing a factor. But people didn't quite feel this loss because of plastic money, credit cards. Families could still maintain the same standard of living they were accustomed to. Dinners out, vacations, homes, but all on borrowed money. Nevertheless, income inequality didn't seem like a problem. Until
closing numbers on the markets today. At one point, the market fell as if down a well, over 700 points.
Apple shares are just getting hammered this morning.
We're down by between 3 and 4.5% generally across these markets. Let's talk about the speed with which we are watching this market deteriorate. We're red everywhere, essentially, down by 4-5%.
We're down over 16%. Dow at the same time has fallen about 18%.
The stock market is now down 21%.
Because we're now down 43%.
What in the world is happening on Wall Street?
So, is income inequality a problem?
We have some of the most unequal incomes in this country since we've been recording the data. So people work hard, they can't really afford to take care of their families. Most of us think that's a problem.
Kevin Lang is a professor of economics at Boston University. He says the problem with income inequality goes beyond just the numbers.
I think it's more if people don't have the sense that they can get ahead, if they have the sense that the system is rigged, if the system is rigged because they can't go to the good schools, they can't afford to go to the good universities, they don't have good nutrition, that's when we run into the problem.
So income inequality has to do partly with a person's confidence in society. Lang adds that inequality affects your education, which ultimately hurts your wallet. But now, experts say it's hurting something even more important.
Despite being the richest country in the world, we have a level of health that's near the bottom of the League of Rich Countries, the OECD.
We sat down with Dr. Ichiro Kawachi.
It kind of threatens both, the possibility of the American dream, but also health in the case, which is what I happen to study.
Kawachi is the chair of the Department of Epidemiology at the School of Public Health at Harvard University.
Living in a period where income inequality is about as serious, the gap between the rich and poor is about as wide as it's ever been in the last century. We're rich, but that wealth is very unequally distributed, and partly as a consequence of that, we pay for it in terms of our lagging health performance.
Dr. Kawachi adds that many health problems in America can be traced back to income inequality, specifically with not being able to achieve the American dream.
If you believe in the dream, but you can't attain it, then you can't blame society. The only person you can blame is yourself. What Americans are dying of are causes of deaths like suicide, opioid drug abuse, alcoholic liver disease, homicides, all of these things which we think are related to basically the disappointment in not being able to attain the American dream.
What Dr. Kawachi is saying is that if you can solve income inequality, you can solve many of those everyday problems that Americans are faced with.
Do all these things have in common? It's really, stress and not being able to achieve what was promised to Americans.
Yeah, hey, how are you?
I'm gonna run.
Yeah.
I'll see you 5-ish. For sure. 5-ish. Yeah, I'll text you as I'm coming back. Do you have to leave?
What time are you thinking of staying here until tonight?
Oh, 6.
All right, that's easy.
All right.
Despite the findings of Lang, Hoxie, and Kawachi, not everyone agrees, with a large number of Americans saying that the only people who want to fix income inequality are those who don't have any wealth. They have clearly never heard of Chuck Collins.
Well, I think, in some ways I grew up in an advantaged family. I'm the great-grandson of the meatpacker Oscar Mayer. I was born on third base. I was able to go to college without taking on any debt. And I see what an amazing head start and privilege that was.
And although Collins decided to give a great deal of his wealth away many years ago, he is still the co-founder of a group called the Patriotic Millionaires, an organization of wealthy people who are for higher taxes on, well, themselves.
Well, it's kind of like the man bites dog story. I mean, people generally expect the wealthiest people in our society to be very happy to lobby for more tax cuts for themselves and lower minimum wages and to be basically happy with the way things are. Whereas our group of patriotic millionaires feels like we've crossed the line into becoming a much more unequal society that it's frankly it's bad for everybody, even for people at the very top of the wealth and income ladder.
Why is it bad for everybody?
Well, I think what happens is that as wealth concentrates in fewer and fewer hands, we now know it has kind of a negative impact on the quality of life. It reduces social mobility. It undermines our democracy. It actually is bad for economic growth and stability. When you have so much wealth in the hands of, say, the top 1%, well, that's $25 trillion that is being invested in highly speculative ways. That actually destabilizes the economy. So the bottom line is too much inequality actually undermines excellence and the kind of society we would all like to live in.
For decades, Collins has lobbied for higher taxes on himself. He has also written a book on inequality titled 99 to 1. Collins was even a featured speaker on his own TED Talk.
I grew up in the top 1%. I won the lottery at birth. And as my father used to say, bringing home the bacon has a different meaning in our family.
Spreading this message about income and wealth inequality is the way Collins says he pays back society, because he understands he was given a leg up in life.
So then the question is, what is my responsibility? But in my case, I feel like I'd like to use the advantages that I have to, build a more equitable society.
Both Collins and Dr. Kawashi say that they often encounter a group of naysayers, people that say that if you work hard enough, put in the hours, anyone can be part of the 1%. But it's easier said than done.
Julie Tran owns her own dry cleaning business in Allston, a neighborhood of Boston.
I work 7 days a week. The rent is expensive.
She works 80 hours a week.
Too many things to do. Laundry, answer phone, mark ticket, and go by order, and tailoring, repair.
She runs this business all by herself.
Oh, I don't have day off, but Monday to Friday, I open 8 to 7, but sometimes busy, I come around 6 o'clock. But Saturday I open 8 to 5, but Sunday maybe off for me because I close early 3 o'clock. Before I'm off, we can go out after they go movie, but now too tired, maybe too old.
Julie's story of perseverance can be explained through her journey to America from Vietnam. It was 1980. She was 16 years old.
I come back home, I cry and tell my father, I don't want to go, I'm scared. My father said, you have to go, you take your brother, go with you, because you stay here, you know future.
Julie did not give up. She would swim again. This would be Julie's 6th time trying to come to the U.S.
And the last time I go with my brother, and we have to swim in from the swimming about half hour. We take the boat because they say they don't take children, they don't take women. And after that, we do paperwork, everything, and we live, first United States, we live in Brighton. I opened all my business.
Despite the tenacity, rent in Boston is expensive, which means she cannot afford to hire someone. But you will never catch Julie complaining.
I love my job. I know work 7 days a week, very crazy, very tired, but the job made me happy, meet different people every day.
Julie has owned this dry cleaning business since 2003, each year, still working 7 days a week. But this hard work has allowed her to put her kids through college. And diligence runs in the family. What do you tell your kids about hard work?
Hard work? Yeah, the kids know because I always talk with my kids about grandfather, my father. He works 365 days. He loved that job. He like working.
At the same time, you know, she gives me and my family that extra drive to succeed and kind of, you know, chase our own dreams as well.
Johnson Tran is the youngest child. He has a bachelor's degree and an MBA.
You know, I do feel empowered to, you know, achieve and, you know, try to work as hard as her, but I know that's impossible.
We did the math. Since 2003, Julie has worked over 4,000 days without taking off more than 60 days over the course of 12 years. She is not a member of the 1%.
But one day maybe I enjoy myself.
But Julie is an inspiration to her kids. A hard worker who reminds people of what the American dream is. But at what cost? Is this classic bedrock principle only achieved by working 80 hours a week for 12 years? Today, Americans are working longer and longer hours, more than anyone in the industrialized world. We take less vacation and we retire later too. Day in and day out, people say they are feeling the effects of income inequality in what many are calling a rigged system.
You know, people want to live the American dream. Here's the thing that, you know, we like to think in the United States that anybody can do it, right? If you have the moxie and you work hard and you get up early in the morning, you can become wealthy in America. I hate to tell you, that's like a 20-year-old self-image. It's like the guy who's 50 and still thinks he looks like the high school athlete that he was.
Colin says this story has changed. Inequality is real, and it is a problem. But how do you fix it?
We need to fix the rigged rules, right? So we can go back to say, well, what were the rules, you know, that kind of got us to this point, and how do we reverse that? We shouldn't have one set of tax rules for global corporations and another set of tax rules for domestic businesses.
Collins tells us that there are a variety of solutions, including investment in workers, raising the minimum wage, education, early childhood development, and changing campaign finance laws. Josh Hoxie offers another solution to solving income inequality.
The most civil and simple way to do that is through taxation. The only other way that it's happened throughout history has been through bloodshed and wars, and I think we universally want to avoid that, right?
But not everyone agrees, especially David Turk. He says it's not income inequality that we should be worried about.
And I would say a much bigger problem in this country is slow economic growth.
Turk is the executive director at the Beacon Hill Institute and an economics professor at Suffolk University.
But we can't get faster economic growth, in my opinion, because of the wrong-headed policies coming out of this administration.
He says if you want to grow the economy, do not tax the rich.
We've raised taxes on the wealthy under this administration. The boats are not lifting. We have high taxes on the wealthy in Europe. Those boats are sinking too. Look, you can, if you want to resort to these kinds of redistributive measures where you're taxing the wealthy to give the money to the less wealthy, that's perfectly fine. But every single economist in the world knows that those high taxes discourage capital formation, they discourage employment, they discourage work, and they are going to exacerbate, not improve, the problem of low economic growth.
Turk's plan to grow the economy involves a tax plan that's fairly straightforward. He calls for a roughly 30% across-the-board consumption tax, meaning you're only taxed on what you spend. No income tax, so you aren't paying any taxes from what you earn. No capital gains tax, and no corporate taxes either. A plan that Turk says will raise all boats.
Well, people on the lower income side need good-paying jobs and need lots of jobs. You can't, as the capital stock expands, you need more workers. So ultimately, as capital formation expands, workers get new jobs and they get higher wages.
We asked Collins what he thinks about people who are against his plan of higher taxes on the wealthy.
I think that there are people who have a set of beliefs that if we cut taxes on the wealthy, that will somehow stimulate some investment that will lift up everyone, meaning that they actually care about people who are poor and left out, but they have a different theory of how that's going to happen. So that was what I would call a well-intentioned, but I would say they live inside of an ideology that isn't borne out by evidence.
In Boston and across the nation, there are many different beliefs on this subject. You see it at the wage rallies and at the political rallies. Hillary and Bernie, to Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, and Chris Christie. Both sides agree it is a problem, but cannot agree on how to solve it. So we asked former Massachusetts Governor Michael Dukakis, now a professor of political science at Northeastern University.
All you can do if you're in a position of great political responsibility, whether you're in the White House, in the State House, or in City Hall, is to use, whatever human qualities you have as well as the prestige of your office to bring people together and say, look, can we agree? If you get them to agree on what the problem is, you're halfway to a solution.
We also asked Dukakis about the people we met at the rally, the fast food workers who want a higher wage.
Well, the conservative community has basically taken this line for a long time, that if you raise the minimum wage, it's going to cost jobs.
Governor Dukakis quotes a study by two economists at Princeton University who looked at New Jersey, a state that had just raised their minimum wage, and Pennsylvania, a state that did not.
Did the increase in the minimum wage in New Jersey, in comparison with Pennsylvania, cost New Jersey jobs? And the answer was not one job. Essentially, talking about getting the minimum wage in real terms back to where it was in 1969.
Governor Dukakis goes on to talk about another piece of legislation, too.
We're now spending $50 billion a year in federal money and significant amounts of state money on something called the Earned Income Tax Credit.
Depending on the year, Americans are eligible for this credit if they make under about $50,000 a year.
We're now paying $50 billion in taxes to subsidize the wages of people whose employers won't pay them a decent minimum wage. So the choice is, okay, who should carry this burden? The taxpayer or employers? I think employers ought to.
Luther Pickney is an employer who is.
So our motto is to share profits with the staff, so that the staff can buy into the restaurant and absolutely benefit from the hard work that they do.
He is the team leader of Dudley Dough, a pizza shop in Roxbury.
There's no owner, there's no team of owners who are trying to fill their pockets first. We're trying to put jobs in the community.
The restaurant is trying out a different type of profit-sharing model. Pickney says these jobs benefit the community in several ways.
We want to try to make it cohesive for them to have family life, be civically engaged, as well as active in their direct family, paying them livable wages, and then on top of that, profit sharing will allow them, hopefully, to work one job, give that job everything that they can, and still have some left over for their family and friends.
This model is felt not only by the workers, but by the customers, too.
Well, I mean, these are people who are coming in every day, or every other day, or twice a week. And it's more than us just taking money from them and giving them a service and saying, see you later. We want them engaged with what we're doing, why we're doing it.
You spend 5 minutes inside Dudley Dough, and you start to realize this isn't your average pizza place. While we were there, we met several tutors who were helping a young person with their math homework. Pickney gives everyone free pizza.
Do you think other businesses could learn from this model?
Absolutely. You know, when you give people a chance and an opportunity, you'd be surprised at the outcome.
If given the opportunity, you'd be surprised by the outcome, Luther says. Whether it's Julie, who came to this country in search of a better life, or LaShonda, who chose to work even when her food stamps were taken away, They say, given the opportunity, they will succeed. Chuck Collins says he wants to inspire people to take a moment to understand that no one gets to wealth alone. The experts can teach us how we got here and how we get out. Even if we can't necessarily agree on a solution, hopefully the politicians can compromise to lead us out. In the end, we can change and reverse this path of income inequality, but not as the 1% or the 99%, but only as the 100%.